Another wave of info regarding Pixel 2 has just released, and the one thing I'll say is a lot more descriptive than ever. Now, it's been a few weeks since we had any major information regarding Pixel 2, apart from the week of GDC, with it being the announcement trailer, as well as the store page being open. Then it became somewhat radio silent for a few weeks, up until recently with them announcing another batch of Q&As, with some of them being a lot more to the point, as I mentioned earlier, or a lot more descriptive as well. So in this video, we'll be going over the new set of Q&As that were shared as of recently. I'm also going to just put some of my input on some of these as well. Hey everyone, you saw the Pixel 2 trailer and left a few questions in the comments. Thank you for that. We love seeing your excitement and curiosity about the game. We picked some of the most common questions and we're happy to share everything we can already tell you about PG2. We know you have plenty more, so keep them coming in the comments. We'll be keeping an eye on them and might answer the next batch very soon. Let's dive in. Starting off with the first question, which is pretty quick and simple, that being when is the release date? To net the answer, Pixel 2 is currently planned for Q3 2026. We'll share the exact release date closer to launch. So, Pixel 2 is expected to be releasing towards the third quarter of this year, that being from July all the way through September. Now, does this debunk the supposed release date being the 26th of August, as it says in the App Store? As we talked about this in the last Pixel 2 video, we sort of talked about how this could be a placeholder for now. Well, the specific release date isn't necessarily off the table, as it could be releasing in August, or it can probably be releasing a little bit earlier in July or a little bit later in September. Could you imagine if they were to just announce the release date during Summer's Game Fest, which is somewhat akin to Gamescom, but for video game announcements? Anyways, moving towards the next question being, will you show more gameplay? To not the answer, absolutely. We'll be gradually revealing more Pixel 2 gameplay and highlighting the new features on the way, from weapons and gadgets to different playstyles, destruction elements, and more. Starting next month, we'll be sharing these updates regularly across our social channels. So not only will we be given more gameplay footage on Pixel 2, but we're also going to be getting them a little bit more frequently than currently. Moving towards the next question, which is a lot more frequent, and with them reiterating here being, what will happen to Pixel 3D after Pixel 2's release? To not to respond, we will continue to actively support Pixel 3D even after the sequel launches. Both games will grow side by side with updates, content, and support for both communities. That's one of the things that I'm glad they somewhat reiterate, saying that Pixel 3D isn't necessarily going to be abandoned or discontinued off the rip once Pixel 2 debuts. Despite Pixel 3D not necessarily having a large community as it had before, at least if someone has a community, and there's probably a couple of people out there that may not like the way that Pixel 2 sort of feels or looks. So we might see some parts of the game being fully completed, or hey, maybe something different than that. Only time will tell. Speaking about looks, the next question being, are there any plans to rework the graphics/art style of the game before the release of Pixel 2? To not the answer, while this visual style is our set foundation, we will further polish and enhance the details as development moves forward. Now, this has been one of the more common discussions regarding Pixel 2 in terms of the visuals, as not many people necessarily like how the way that it looks. As I mentioned this in the last Pixel 2 video, it's a lot more polygon-esque and not necessarily too cubical as similar to Pixel 3. So even though we're not going to see an overhaul of the visuals for Pixel 2, at least the one thing they're going to do is somewhat improve it over time. Moving on towards the next question, which is a lot more relevant, that being how much AI was used and in what ways. With them responding, we totally understand why people are cautious about AI these days. As we mentioned before, we only use it in very limited and specific areas, mostly related to marketing. Everything you see in game, in the trailer, and then the gameplay footage is hand-built. Our artists and developers have poured their care into every detail, shaping this world with the kind of attention only a human team can provide. We recently shared a behind-the-scenes look at the trailer, and we'll keep showing more of the team's work in future videos. And as you can see on screen, being a short of behind-the-scenes on the Pixel 2 announcement trailer that they provided, which does look interesting to see from an outside perspective, which I wouldn't necessarily mind if there's going to be any bonus content that will probably show, like for example with concept designs. It might disprove that Pixel 2 is entirely AI generated, though the only concern that I have for Pixel 2 is in terms of them using AI for being limited in marketing, especially with the interview video that was released last year, with it somewhat tarnishing Pixel 2. You just need to hope for the best that they don't necessarily do is repeat the same mistake, instead try to do is rebuild that community trust again. Rather than the next question being, Pixel 3D and Pixel 2 looks different. Why? We understand that over the years, many of you have grown deeply attached to the classic look of Pixel 3D. Pixel 2 is designed to carry the series' legacy forward. We aim to preserve our familiar Pixel DNA, but interpret it through its own own unique style. Well, the best way to summarize this trying to do is capture the way that Pixel 3D feels, gameplay-wise, with a new coat of paint. Moving on towards the next question being, will my phone explode with all these graphics and environmental details? Don't worry, despite the detailed destruction and high fidelity, our team has managed to optimize the game to run smoothly. We want Pixel 2 to be accessible to a wide audience without sacrificing performance, so it mainly focuses on the optimization of Pixel 2. Let's just hope for the best that it runs pretty well at launch. Moving on towards the next question being, how does Pixel 2 keep gameplay skill-based? A fair competitive environment is the very foundation of Pixel 2. We're committed to keeping gameplay balanced and fair for everyone. First of all, we're working on an innovative matchmaking system that goes beyond basic progression. It takes into account how players actually perform in matches, their overall power, and how they play, helping create more even and competitive matchups. At the same time, we're adding a modifier system that brings an extra layer to builds and introduces some variability and other unpredictability, rewarding smart choices while keeping gameplay dynamic and engaging. With this question being pretty simple, talking about the more in-depth gameplay with what Pixel 2 might offer. And with the final question being, what about weapon balance? Our team is focused on creating modern gameplay with a deep meta that will be truly engaging to all kinds of players. That's why in Pixel 2 we are engineering a balance-first architectural built on both on our own enterprise and the best practices from across the genre. The system is designed from the ground up to prevent power creep and meta imbalances. We're also focusing on meaningful build variety, ensuring that weapons and abilities synergize naturally to reward creative playstyles. So the best way to explain it is that weapon balancing in Pixel 2 is going to be a lot more different than Pixel 3D. Especially with it being a different game and having the flexibility to introduce balanced weapons on the spot instead of what we have currently with Pixel 3D having to try to attempt to balance 1.5k weapons. But the unfortunate part is that we're not so sure how that's gonna go since the game is not even out yet, so only time will tell. And that's all the questions that we've covered as of recently, as they did state that there's gonna be more questions on the way, so might as well stay tuned for that. And I guess that's gonna do for this video, so thank you guys so much for watching. Do you guys have any questions or opinions? Leave them down in the comments down below. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, have a good day or night whenever you're watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next video.